you? Okay, yeah, right on cue. Thanks. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker today, Cyndi Knudson. She is a regional specialist for small farms in Northeast North Carolina. In her position, Cyndi develops programs to educate and uplift small farmers. She's also got an active specialty crop research and demonstration program with a current focus on ginger production and biodegradable mulch materials. So talk to Cyndi about those things. She's a small farmer herself. Over the years, she's produced feeder calves, market lambs and goats, market hogs, and poultry for eggs and meat. In addition, Cyndi's grown fruits and vegetables in the field and in high tunnels and hydroponically and sold through her own farm, CSA. So currently she raises and sells honey and honeybees at Honey River Farm in Whitestone, Virginia. She's graduated from Virginia Tech with a BS in biochemistry and the University of Georgia with a Master's of Science in Animal and Dairy Science. And she's written and received numerous grants, both in her work with cooperative extension and as a small farmer, and is looking forward to sharing her experience and tools for successful grant writing. So thank you, Cyndi, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, let me start my screen share. And I get a thumbs up that you see my screen. I only see Brennan. So Brennan, we'll assume everyone sees it. There we go. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm very excited to be here today to talk to you. I'm sorry, I'm looking at one thing on my computer about writing grants for your farm operation and just some tools and tips for success for writing these grants. Mary gave a nice detailed introduction, so I won't say anything else about myself other than in my current job as a farmer, I write and manage grants, and as an extension specialist, I do write I don't write grants for farmers, but I do help them and guide them and offer resources. And let's see if this is going to let me change my page. All right, we're kind of stuck. So I'm going to stop share and reshare and see if we can't get that to work better. Had that happen before, it seems to get stuck. We'll try this. Okay. So when we're looking at grants and grant opportunities, we have to kind of ask ourselves some questions to start with. And one of the first ones to look and determine what is the correct opportunity for you is, why are you farming? Are you just trying to grow healthy food for you and your family? The term we often refer to now is homesteading, like we did back in the old days. Are you trying to have an income from farming, either your primary income or a side income? That makes you more of a farm business and opens up different opportunities. Are you trying to have community impact, either by providing fresh fruits, vegetables, and meat products to your community, or by offering mental health programs or community job skill building opportunities? Those are many farms I see these days are almost farming more in that aspect than they are in gaining their income from a commodity that they're producing. Or do you just farm mostly for your own exercise and enjoyment? And then the next question I ask farmers who come to me looking for help is, why are you looking for a grant? You know, what is your purpose? Sometimes we have funds to cover our expenses, but we've heard there's all this free money out there. You know, there's money to buy a farm, there's money to buy equipment, there's money to do this, there's money to do that. But often what we hear isn't completely accurate, and we're not really getting the whole story. But there is money out there. So what are the pros of applying for and obtaining grants for your farm? The first is quite obvious. It's free money. It's not a loan. It's a grant. Someone gave you that money to overcome an obstacle that you have in your farm operation. You don't have to pay it back. Big pro. Sometimes a grant helps you overcome an obstacle in your farming operation that you could not manage yourself, or it just improves the time that it would take for you to overcome that obstacle yourself. I also think of receiving grants as a little bit of moral support or a pat on the back. By applying for and receiving a grant, you get that affirmation that someone else believes in you, believes in your farm, believes in your cause, maybe believes in your chance for success. But it's also an opportunity I found with different grants that I have received. I get a lot of publicity, some marketing, and connections with other people that have received those grants. For example, my honey was featured in a dinner last night at the Virginia State Fair for the Taste of Virginia, all because of a grant that I am involved in that connected me to some other chefs and people that made that happen. So there's a lot of pros that aren't just money, it's connections and networking. But there are some cons. Time and effort to apply. So every time you apply for a grant, you are seeking out those opportunities, you're getting your application prepared. It takes a lot of time. Some of them are pretty quick and simple. A lot of the nonprofits where they're kind of asking you a series of questions and for a little bit of data, it's not overwhelmingly time and effort to apply. I will tell you the value added producer grant I have for my farm that we received in 2021, it took me over 100 hours to write that grant. And that was not without help. It's also time and organization for your record keeping and reporting. The worst thing you can do is obtain a grant and then not complete your obligations for record keeping and reporting, especially since most of them reimburse your funds and you have to turn all that in to get reimbursed. So it takes a lot of time. There's federal forms sometimes. There's all kinds of other record keeping that's required for these grants. One other con, if you are a farm for profit and you file a Schedule F with your income taxes, you use your farm expenses to subtract from your gross farm profit to arrive at your net farm profit or loss. And because of that, if you are granted funds that cover your expenses, you are essentially either canceling out that expense with income and you are increasing your farm profit, which, I mean, you can't complain, you've increased your profit, but you may bump yourself up into a different tax bracket. And you do need to be aware that your expenses for tax purposes on your profit or loss for farming Schedule F may be very different if you obtain a grant in a certain year. The other con can be obligations to a granting agency. Now, I just said it previously, they're also a great benefit with the networking and connections that you might make, but usually you have an obligation to appear somewhere, to have your name and likeness and farm story on their website as a previously funded grantee. You may have other obligations to have a field day or workshop. But you need to be aware of those obligations and know that you have to follow through with those. And most of the time we kind of enjoy it, but it can be a lot of work. So do just a little more background because we hear these terms used quite loosely a lot and they kind of cross over, but kind of break it down between loans, grants, and cost shares. All right, loans are just that. Someone has loaned you something, usually money. You have to give it back to them. There are opportunities to apply for in certain arenas with foundations and federal agencies and state agencies where you might be able to get that loan at a 0% interest or a lower than commercial interest rate. So there are benefits there looking at loans through some of these groups and agencies. And sometimes they will guarantee your loan with a commercial lender. So even though you're still getting the loan from a lender, you might not have gotten that loan otherwise if you had not gotten the help from the agencies to guarantee that loan. The Small Business Administration and FSA both kind of function in that way to help you get financing that you might need. So grants, like we said before, someone gave it to you, you get to keep it. You have to meet your obligations. Cost shares, we typically relate with USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service programs and a lot of your county soil and water conservation district programs where it is a cost share. You're paying part, they're paying part. And there's usually a fixed amount that they'll pay no matter how much it costs you. But they are helping you to meet the obligation to pay for something that you need on your farm through a cost share. If we go backwards, grants are often somewhat of a cost share. Almost every grant I've ever dealt with required some type of match, whether it's cash match, which a lot of like the value added producer grants are usually a 50-50 cash match. So whatever you're asking for, you have to be able to put up that same amount. There's other percentages for different grants, and sometimes they'll allow in-kind match, where you are providing labor as a match, or maybe the agricultural commodity that you produce as a match. But there's very few grants that just hand you the dollars without you having some skin in the game, but there are some. So the first thing we got to do is search for appropriate grant sources. I'd love to put up a list right here that would just cover everybody, but you will probably know already that your state, your region, your county, your city, there's so many diverse options that are available in one place and not the other. And there's also differences, even in the same cost shares, say for NRCS, there are differences between states and differences between counties. So the best thing to do is, I always start with Google. Google search it in every different way you can. Look at farming grants, small farming grants, young farming grants, beginning farming grants, or change up the words. That's a good place to start. Then go to your extension office. Most county extension agents are aware of locality specific grants and are happy to share that information with you. Some specific locality grants actually require that you work with an extension agent to submit that grant. We have some of those in North Carolina, but it works good, causes you to really dig deep sometimes and do some research with the extension agent before you submit the grant. The other place to look for sources, of course, is your USDA Service Center. Sometimes in that individual, they used to all be county USDA service centers. Now sometimes they're multi-county, but they don't even always have all the people that you need. For example, sometimes the rural development people are not in every office. So you have to dig a little deeper if you're looking at value-added producer grants or some of the rural development business loans and that type of thing. But we can dig out those sources, use all your people in your locality to find them. Once again, some of the trouble spots, or what you're not usually going to find grants for, are very beginning farmers. Most times they want to know that you've done something, that you have some experience, some history. That's not always true. And Rafi, the sponsoring or the agency putting on this webinar, is one that does have a true beginning farmer grant program that you don't have to have experience. It's very unusual to find a grant that will allow you to use the funds to purchase land or equipment, but those do exist. But be aware that sometimes those aren't so easy to find. We want to look at your obstacles. What's holding you back? Why do you need this grant? So most of the time, personally, my biggest obstacle is usually equipment. And unfortunately, grants don't usually help me with that. But if I'm able to pay other expenses, then I can use my own funds for the equipment that I need. Land is often a stumbling block. Knowledge. Do you know enough about what you're growing? Are you growing profitably? Could you grow better? Labor can often be an issue. The cost of supplies, which has been going up increasingly ever since COVID, can be a big issue. And also marketing help. So for example, the value-added producer grant, I keep referring back to that one because it does so much as far as providing funds for marketing, helping you build a website, hire a professional photographer, pay for some social media posts. It does help pay for supplies. It can also help with labor. It does not offer any help on equipment or land. You have to look elsewhere for that. But you need to find the grants and look at what they're willing to fund to help you improve your farm. So once you've kind of know what your obstacles are, one of the main things that every grant application is going to ask for in one way or another is, how will you getting this grant improve your farm business? The user asking that and want your qualitative and quantitative answer for that. This is where I find a lot of beginning farmers or people who aren't in the grant writing world don't give enough detail. Everything that you answer about your qualitative improvement of your farm business needs to be very specific. It needs to be, more like, not that this money will make my farm better because I can produce more. That doesn't tell you enough. Maybe it's, I will now be able to increase my broccoli production by 1 acre because I will be able to use this equipment to manage more acreage. It needs to be very specific. How will this improve your farm? And you need to have a business plan. I'll talk a little bit more about business plans in a little bit, but you need to know your profit and your loss. What is the gross profit you could get if you produced maximally and sold every bit of it for your price? And then you subtract out all your expenses, your supplies, your seed, your water, your electricity, your equipment depreciation, and your labor. Don't forget your labor. None of us work for free. Add your labor. So are you profitable? If you're applying for a grant and you're operating at a loss, you need to tell them how this grant's going to help you become profitable. If it's not, then why are you continuing to operate at a loss? They're not, people want to watch you succeed. So you need to be able to explain your, some require a lot more detail than others, but your cash flow, your assets, your debts, you need to have a handle on all those. You may not need to list those out specifically, but you need to have a handle to know what you can handle, the cash match of the grant, or explain your financial situation to the granting agency. You need to be able to share your experience level and how you've gained that experience. And all this kind of feeds into the likelihood of success of your farm, which is what the grading agency wants to see. Will their help you be successful? So one thing I always say is don't wait. Don't wait till you see that grant RFP open up, or RFP is just a short word for request for proposals, because sometimes that's too late. Go ahead when you have time. Seems like RFPs always come when you're harvesting or planting or family crisis, something's always going on at the same time. But write your farm story now. Write a little bit about your history. Put some specifics in about your objectives and your goals. Then research sources for the needed items, whether that's equipment and you need to just literally look up where you're going to buy that piece of equipment and how much it costs, and just kind of have that in a folder. Maybe it's, I need more labor, but where am I going to find that labor? How much do I need to pay them? You need to be able to have this information ready. So when you go look at different grants, you're not starting from scratch each time you're filling in an application. Keep a folder, keep the information, keep it updated. If you are applying for any of the federal grants or the state grants that trickle down from federal grants, and that would include the value-added producer grant and specialty crop block grants, you need to have an account at login.gov, which will then allow you to log into sam.gov and grants.gov. That allows you to get a unique entity ID that allows you to access and manage grants. That doesn't happen overnight. You cannot log in today, create an account, and get your ID. Sometimes it takes weeks. So do that now if you plan to look at different federal opportunities. Don't wait until you're trying to do it during the RFP. Another thing I do, and when Mary just mentioned that their RFP is going to, Ralphie's RFP is going to open in January, I have my calendar for next year. And each time a grant RFP is announced, I write down the window and the deadlines in my next year's calendar. Is it always the same? Nope. But often it's very similar. And that way you can flip through and look at the months ahead and say, oh yeah, I would like to apply for that grant this year. I didn't have time last year. And you can be ahead of the game and know what you need in time to get all your paperwork together. A lot of times there's qualifying paperwork, and I remind people to put a folder on their computer where they can scan these documents and have them ready to upload and submit. Sometimes if you're qualifying as a veteran or applying for something like with the Farmer Veteran Coalition, you'll need your DD 214 paperwork. If you're trying to, sometimes you'll have to document your years of farming experience by submitting previous Schedule Fs. And sometimes you'll need to submit other financial statements. That's another place. I work with some farmers who maybe aren't the most computer literate, and your extension office is one place you can go to get help uploading things and trying to figure out some of the IT parts of submitting grants applications online. So that's my other thing is you need to create your team. That is one of the most important parts of writing grants is you really are going to do so much better not trying it all on your own. Talk to your cooperative extension, both to find opportunities, let them help you research ideas. Maybe there's something that's been tried before that's a little bit different. They can help you flesh out what you're writing. The Small Business Administration is excellent for helping you develop a business plan. There are some more farm business related opportunities. They have good trainings. Other farmers, share ideas with them. Sometimes collaborating on a grant will be a more successful opportunity than you doing it by yourself. Other agencies, certain states like the Farm Bureau in Virginia has a division that specifically helps small farmers with small grants. There's no way I would have completed the value-added producer grant and checked every box on the complicated form by myself and got it approved. The VA fairs was a big help in that respect. Some states have it, some states don't, but it's always worth asking. Farm Credit can sometimes offer opportunities like that also. And proofreaders, that may sound kind of silly, but you need to submit a professional application. You need your grammar, your punctuation, your ideas. Sometimes what you wrote is perfectly clear to you. Let someone proofread it and make sure it's clear to them. Sometimes you work on these grants so long, you kind of don't even notice your errors because you've read it 50 times trying to submit it. Another thing I do on these online submissions, I do most of my work. I'll write down the question and do my work in a program like Word that's doing autocorrect on spelling and just kind of easier to see what you're writing. If you're submitting some of these online on SurveyMonkey or different things, it's very hard to see what you wrote. It's also hard to let anyone else proofread it. So do your work in Word and then copy and paste it into the online application. But beware of word limits. You have to keep those in mind so you don't write too much and have to delete over half of it. So the other thing to remember in writing successful grants is what makes you special. Why should you get this grant over everyone else that's applying? Have you obtained training and certification to make yourself a better, more successful candidate? Some of it's more farm financial. Farm Credit University has some excellent ag business planners and other different programs on ag finance for small farmers. The Small Business Administration has an excellent new program, the Rural Ascent Program for women in agriculture. Most universities have farm schools that you can attend either online and in person, both for production skill sets, but also for farm business plans. Let the granting agency know what your skill sets are, what you've learned, what the trainings you've been to. Also make it very clear what your products are. Describe in detail what you are trying to grow or what you're trying to produce, what community impact you plan on having. Do you have farm events? Do you give back to your community? How do you interact with your community to be a good citizen? Also, overcoming hardship can be a criteria. It's one of those things that works on the right place. The picture on this slide is of one of my small farms this year that had a fire in March and lost their whole barn, all their hay, some of their livestock. It was very devastating, and they were just going to call it quits. They've been a small niche meats producer for a little while. It's a lot to go through. But between just the community, they've been so impactful in the community that everyone rallied around. They did go for some grants and they rebuilt the barn and didn't have to wipe out their savings, and they stayed in business. Another thing is innovation and ideas. If you're that experimenter, different organizations like SARE or the Sustainable Ag Research and Education have grants for you to experiment. I had one many years ago with the meat goats, looking at whether barley or corn was a more feed efficient choice for feeding out meat goat kids. So it wasn't like it bought me any equipment, but it paid for a season's worth of feed for about 60 little meat goat kids, and portable scale and some better feeders. And there was some ways to, I also learned that barley at 1/5 the cost of corn at that time was a better feed option. And we had a really very nice, interesting field day at the farm. So there's all kinds of different things you can look at. It's kind of to summarize some of the tips. Make sure you read and understand what they're asking. We read too fast, we don't pay attention, we get halfway through our answer and head off into a different direction. Write your answer, go back and read the question again. Make sure what you're writing is answering their question and using specifics. Make sure you're asking for allowable expenses. It's my understanding in most cases of large grants, over 50% of the grant applications are thrown out from the get-go for technicalities. You're asking for things that are not allowable. You're not meeting all the requirements. It's helpful also to gather letters of support, either from someone in the community that you impact, maybe some of your customers. Some grants allow you to upload letters of support, others do not, but it's nice to have a couple with other farmers or community organizations or customers that you work with. Pay attention to deadlines, especially in this online application age. A deadline's a deadline. If you missed it by an hour, you're still too late. And it's easy for those deadlines to slip past us. We're also busy. Make sure you follow through with all of your responsibilities, and any questions they may come back to you with. You'll get eliminated pretty quick if you're not responding to follow-up questions from the granting agency. And be prepared for the reports that you will need to submit throughout the grant process. I don't know about my time, but I'm going to run down just a little. We're
getting a little close here, Cyndi.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm kind of going to let you read some of these. This is some nonprofits and associations. A lot of them, these all have grants. Some of them are very specific, like the Young Farmers Coalition. You have to be under 40. So I would obviously not apply for that one. There's a farmer veteran. You have to be a veteran. So look at local food hubs. We have several that have small grants for packaging and that type of thing. It's not a lot, but they're less competitive. AARP actually has one for a grant for retraining new skills to older workers. So if you have some employees, and you can send them for training through that AARP grant so that they develop new skills, which will help you in the long run. There's some private industry grants between Whole Foods, Amazon, Tractor Supply. A lot of those definitely either have a small business focus, which as a farm, you can be a small business, or they have a community impact focus. Your local government, there's a number of USDA rural development loans that you cannot apply for as a farmer, but your community, your city, your county, your economic development people can apply for to help you get business loans, which, like I said, you are not eligible to apply for yourself. So you need to work with your local government for those. I've seen those work really well. Your state Department of Agriculture does have the specialty crop block grants, which usually works best for associations or grower groups. And I've had some very successful ones come out through specialty crop block grant for marketing a specific commodity or for getting equipment for an association for shared use. So it was still a benefit to the individual farmer. Value added producer grants, of course, and your small business administration development centers have resources for you. I know Brennan's going to cover a lot of the federal stuff. Most of them are cost shares. You can get a grant to cover organic certification, but then it is your cost to maintain it, and it can be quite expensive. And NEFA, beginning farmer and rancher grants, are often given to organizations, nonprofits, universities to help with training for farmers and beginning farmers and ranchers. That is something that you should talk to your university or nonprofits that you work with and see what you need training in. What can they apply for a NEFA grant for that might help you? There's a lot of money going that way right now. There's also some climate smart specific grants that there's funding going out to individual farmers if you implement certain practice. If you Google climate smart projects, you can read every single one and which ones might apply to your state. So we're going to talk about some others. We'll just go beyond that. And this is my contact information. This is my email. I'm at North Carolina A&T. And this is my cell phone. You are welcome to call it, text it, whatever. I'd be happy to answer questions. And we have a network called the Northeast North Carolina Small Farms Network on social media, where we try to share grant opportunities and upcoming trainings with people in the area.
Great, Cyndi, thank you so much. This is very valuable information, and we actually have some questions. So you mentioned you can say like 5 more minutes to
Definitely.
answer. Okay. So first we have Marcy. She or they put their hands up. Marcy, are you there? Do you want to speak up? Okay, so I don't know if they still have attention there, but we can start with the other written questions. So the first one is, how do small-scale farmers compete with larger-scale farmers or organizations when applying for grants? Is there a way to make applications stand out?
Well, typically, the grants that small farmers will be applying for are completely different than grants that larger farmers will be applying for in general. There's actually, I would say, more grants for small farmers than there are for large farmers. If you're talking about USDA cost shares, sometimes because of the acreage and the impact on the environment, large farmers can sometimes have more access to some of those practices because of, like I said, the scale that they're improving things on. But as far as grants, they're very rarely going to be applying for what you're applying for. And just making yourself stand out by very carefully describing yourself, your farm, your product, and why is it special and why is it different. And I would just be considering myself competing with other small scale farmers in general.
Great, thank you. So the next question is from Cheryl and
Carolina. I think we should maybe wait until the end of Brennan's presentation for the rest of these questions, just to make sure that he's got the time that he needs. But again, y'all are seeing Cyndi's contact info on your screen. She's obviously a great wealth of information. Thank you so much for being here, Cyndi. And so her phone lines are open, right?
Definitely phone, email, text. I'm happy to answer. Yeah, and I see something about the FACT grant, the Farm Animal or Food Animal Concerns Trust. Those are good options. So a lot of good options out there. And your state specific, I'm happy to help you look, but your state specific extension people probably have a lot already in their mind.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much. And for now, we'll switch to Brennan. Just for a quick introduction here. Thanks again, Cyndi. Brennan Washington owns Phoenix Gardens, which is a small, diversified farm in Lawrenceville, Georgia. They grow produce and raise laying hens and broiler chickens. He's a graduate of the Southern University Small Farm Agricultural Leadership Institute and the University of Georgia's Advancing Georgia Leaders in Agriculture Leadership Program. He's currently serving as the 1890 Land Grant Liaison and Southeastern Outreach Coordinator for Southern SARE. He also sits on the USDA Urban Agriculture Advisory Committee for Atlanta, as well as the advisory committees for the Appalachian Regional Commission, the Wallace Center, and Rodale Southeastern Operations Center. Brennan regularly speaks on federal grant funding for agriculture and was successful in directing a project team to winning a $30 million food system grant for the Southeast. Before his farming career, he had a long career in information technology management. So welcome, Brennan, and thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you to Rafi for having me speak to your audience today. I know how hard it is for farmers and organizations to take time out of their day to do stuff like this. So hopefully we'll make this valuable for you. So Mary gave you my bona fides, and I am just going to share my screen here. And I'm going to, now, just to show you how expansive federal grants are, this is part of a course that I actually spent two days giving. So discussing about applying for federal grants and learning what the landscape of federal grants is a fairly complex topic, but grant making itself and applying for grants does not have to be complex. And I'm going to be skipping through a lot of this. Some of this Cyndi has already covered already. But the one thing I want to leave most of y'all with in the short time that we have together is what grants applies to you as farmers. And Mary, I'm assuming the bulk of folks on this call are farmers, but we'll probably have some NGOs as well. Who's our audience here?
Yeah, I think that's true.
Okay. Okay, so these are, I think, grants that every both farmers should know about, as well as nonprofit organizations. Most universities and institutions of higher education don't really know about a lot of these programs, but unfortunately, a lot about NGOs and directly for our farmers. And I will tell you, not to break the heart of many farmers that is on this phone call, at the federal level, there are very few grants that you can apply to directly. Most of the grants that can go directly to farmers are done through the good work of organizations like Rafi. But once you start talking about federal funding, once you start about talking about federal funding for grants, now we're not talking about cost shares like NRCS, which are available to farmers. Most of it's only going to be available to nonprofits, cooperatives, and institutions of higher learning, State Department of Agriculture, and that type of stuff. But these are the programs that you should know about. So Cyndi had mentioned the Beginning Farm and Rancher Development Program. And I speak a lot on this stuff. I've also spent a lot of time over the last over 10 years actually acting as a grant reviewer. So my tip number one to you, if you really want to understand the grant making process, especially at the federal level, is to become a grant reviewer. All of these grants that you see on this screen are graded and judged and recommended for funding, and projects are recommended for funding by a grant review panel. And these panels look for people who have certain expertise in the fields that you're dealing in. So you don't have to have a PhD. You don't have to have all these letters behind your name in order to become a grant reviewer. And there's an absolute, and I tell people to become a grant reviewer for two reasons. One, it helps you want to be a better grant writer, become a reviewer. It will really help you understand what happens once you hit that submit button to submit your application. Two, we need diversified voices in those rooms when they're making decisions on these grant programs. We need more people of color. We need more women. We need more veterans serving on these grant panels so that those perspectives are brought into these rooms. So I've served as a reviewer for several of these programs that are on the screen. Just let me talk about them really quickly. National Institute of Food and Agriculture runs the Beginning Farm and Rancher Development Program, which, as Cyndi alluded to, is the USDA's primary vehicle for funding training for beginning farmers and ranchers. And that's to set up any type of training program. The National Dairy Grazing Apprenticeship Program was established by Beginning Farmer Rancher Development Program. There are other programs around the country that have been started by this program. Max amount of funding is $250,000 a year for a grand total of $750,000 over 2 years. You do not have to ask for that much money, but that's what the max is available. They also have an EPT SNAP grant development program, and this presentation is a little bit old, so I don't know if that program is still available, but it was available to help farmers markets and other organizations introduce EBT and SNAP programming into their local marketing efforts. The next three are things that I think every farmer should know about, and I'm always surprised when I go speak that a lot of people don't. The first one, and it's all part of a program called the Local Agricultural Marketing program, or the LAMP program. It consists of three programs: the Farmers Market Promotion Program, the Local Foods Promotion Program, and the Value Added Producer Grant Program, which Cyndi has talked about. The Farmers Market Promotion Program funds any marketing opportunity where that dollar is going directly from the consumer to a producer with no middleman in between. So that means your farmers markets, that means multi-farm CSAs, in some cases it could mean roadside stands. Any marketing channel where that dollar is passing directly from the consumer to the farmer is what the Farmers Market Promotion Program covers. The typical award is right around $100,000, and you can use it to help you set up farmers markets, to help you pay for labor, material supplies, marketing, publicity, all of that good stuff. There is some training and technical assistance money available in that grant as well. I wrote a $100,000 FMPP grant, about 10 years ago, for us to establish the Georgia Farmers Market Association. We were able to get that money to set up an association to help folks set up farmers markets within the state of Georgia. So that is one program. The sister program to that is the Local Foods Promotion Program. So just as the FMPP program is concerned with direct consumer to producer marketing channels, LFPP is concerned more about value chain components and infrastructure related programs. So a lot of our early food hubs were started with money coming from LFPP. Georgia Organics recently got a grant to do basically the equivalent of a CSA program for restaurants in the state of Georgia, where they will buy and consolidate produce from farmers and supply it to restaurants in the Atlanta metro area. There was a food bank in the North Georgia mountains that used the LFPP program to establish a flash freezing facility up in the north, where farmers could come in and have their produce flash frozen. So that's what that particular program is. Cyndi did explain a little bit about the value-added producer grant program. That is basically turning strawberries into strawberry jam, and it's monies associated to help individual farmers do that. So this is one of the few programs that a farmer could access directly. Southern SARE, who I'm their outreach coordinator, we have about 7 grant programs, and the ones I'd like to point out to you are our producer grant program, which our producer can apply directly. Cyndi talked about her GOAT program. I got involved with the SARE program about 15 years ago because I wanted to know why whenever you went to a farmer's market in the South, you only saw watermelons and cantaloupes being sold. You didn't see a wide variety of the European type melons, the French melons that are really, really delicious, but you didn't see them when you went to market. I want to know why. And nobody could tell me why. So why can't we grow these down here? Well, you just can't. And that's the answer that I got from a lot of people. And then finally, somebody told me about the SARE program. I had never written a grant before in my life. Applied to the SARE program, and I got $10,000 to do a SARE producer grant program. That program is now $20,000 for a single producer doing their own self-directed research on their farm. $25,000 if they are involving another farmer. And some of the projects we funded through this, there was a producer down in the Virgin Islands where they produce a lot of value-added products such as medicinal tinctures and juices and that type of stuff. Well, she was producing a medicinal tincture that had basil as its base, its main ingredient. And she wanted to know what variety of the 3 varieties she was growing gave her the most bang for the buck in terms of the medicinal quality she was looking for. And so after years of working with her and trying to convince her that grants aren't this big mystifying thing, she applied for a grant, was successful in getting some money to run a 2-year program in participation with the University of Virgin Islands to see what basil was actually best for the tinctures that she was developing. We are particularly interested right now in anybody who has ideas about scale appropriate technology. You know, when you look at small to medium-sized farms, most of the technology, and that's from mechanical, meaning things like tractors and harvesters, are really made for the big guys, not made for us. And we're always looking for ideas with farmers tinkering around on how to develop technology, both mechanical and computerized, that fits the needs of small to mid-scale farmers. We also have another program called the On-Farm Research Development Program, which is the same program as our producer grant program, except a third party's actually carrying out the research on your farm. So instead of you yourself doing the research, let's say I want this problem to be studied, but I don't feel like designing a research project and running it. You can ask your local extension office or a nonprofit like Rafi to come in and help you run that project. And then there's the 2501 program, which is the Office of Advocacy and Outreach, which once again funds projects that do outreach to farmers, particularly about letting them know what federal programs are out there. There's still a lot of mystification about what federal programs are out there, trying to clear up some of the misperceptions about grants. And let me clear up one of those misperceptions right now. So for your cost share programs, primarily through FSA and NRCS, almost everybody in this call has probably heard of a farm and tract number. You need to have those 2 pieces of information in order to be able to apply for their program. But that's not true about the majority of grants that you see on this screen. You don't need a farm and tract number for our programs. You don't need a farm and tract number for FMPP, LFPP. You don't need a farm and tract number for beginning farming and rancher development program. So as far as advice, the one thing I want you to think about when I travel around the Southeast, and I cover 13 Southeastern states, U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, one of the misnomers, sometimes I hear people say, oh, well, grants are not worth it, and, they're just not worth the time. Your funding for either your farm or your farming organization, your funding is a toolbox. And in that toolbox, you're going to have different tools. It could be loans, it could be grants, it could be cost shares. You may have a particular need that a particular tool won't work for. But you may, for example, if you came to SARE and asked for money to help you build a high tunnel, nothing we could do for you. We don't have any tools in our toolbox to help you do that. We would send you to NRCS. That's where the tools are for you to need to build that farm infrastructure. Now, if you wanted to know how you could build how you can grow hibiscus and ginger inside of those high tunnels, then you come to us. We have those tools. Just think of it as a toolbox when you're looking at your funding needs. I want to echo something that Cyndi says. One is to be strategic. Most of these grants come out around the same time every year. Beginning farmer and rancher development typically comes out the end of December, depending on what's going on in DC, comes out the end of December with a close date of somewhere in March, and they'll make their award announcement sometime in the fall. Farmers market promotion program has typically come out in the early spring, with their applications being closed sometime in late spring, early summer, with their awards being made once again in the fall. So even if you get off this call and you note these grant programs, go on their website and look for the call for proposals that they put out last year, or the request for proposal that they put out last year, and download it and read it, and know that if this is something that I can put into my toolbox, and I'm going to be ready for it when they open this grant again in 2024. The other thing you should look at when you're looking at grants, it's not all about you. These agencies put out this money because they are looking to accomplish specific goals within agriculture. So in terms of Southern SARE, we are looking for research-based projects that will advance sustainable agriculture. And in terms of the Farmers Market Promotion Program, they are looking, that agency is, which is Agricultural Marketing Services, is looking for projects that will increase the number of direct producer to consumer sales. So you not only need to look at what your farm needs, it's also what are the needs of the agency that is putting out this grant, and does what I need coincide with the needs of that agency? And if you match, then it's fine. And you go ahead and take a look at it, and you look at the RFP that they sends out. That request for your proposal is your Bible. That tells you everything you need to address in your application. So if it's not in the RFP, or if the RFP specifically tells you you can't do something, then don't put it in there. We have a program called our Professional Development Program at Southern SARE, and that's basically our train-the-trainer program, where we fund projects that train people who will then go out and train farmers. Strictly education, strictly train-the-trainer. And we had our grant review panel last week, and it was a really, really good application, actually from an organization that I know very well and does really good work. But they put a research component. They had a heavy research component within their application, which was for a program that was train-the-trainer. So they didn't get funded. They didn't get invited back to submit another application. So it's very important for you to understand that that call for proposal, the request for a proposal, back and forth. And don't be afraid to call up the people who work at these agencies and ask questions if you have questions. That's what they're there for. They're there to clear up any misperceptions that you may have, and don't accept. You may go and listen, sit in on a session like this, and you may hear something and then look at a particular call for proposal, request for proposal, and that's not in there. And so you should always err on the side of either calling that agency and saying, well, wait a minute, I just heard that this, and I'll give you a perfect example. There's a huge meat grant out now to support the development of new meat and poultry processing plants. And it's a killer of a grant. And sometimes you'll read these calls for proposal and you think the granting agency that put this out has lost their daggone mind. And sometimes you'll be correct, but it is what it is. You just got to do it because, for example, in this particular grant program, you have to develop a business plan and a feasibility study and do environmental surveys for the land where you're going to site this plant. And you got to get it all done before the day before Thanksgiving. But I heard through another call, just through a phone call and talking with some people, that you need to have a separate feasibility study. If you're going to have multiple locations, you need to have a separate feasibility study for each location. But when you read that call for proposal, it says no such thing. It says no such thing. So this is when you would get on the phone and say, well, look, I heard this, but that's not in your call for proposal. And then sometimes they are going to be wrong with the Regional Food Business Center grants, which just awarded last year. One of the things was the indirect costs, and all these grants will have what's called indirect costs. I call that keeping the light money, keeping the lights on money. But basically, whoever's the applicant will get 10% of whatever the total grant amount is to help them oversee that grant. And in most cases, that's 10% of the grant. However, organizations like North Carolina A&T and all, especially educational organizations, do go to the government and negotiate a separate indirect cost rate. And for this particular grant, it was only 10%. And the universities had a fit because they're used to having indirect cost rates 30, 40, 50%. And 10%, you know, some of their institutions would have said, don't even bother applying for it. So they pushed back on that within the context of that RFP, and they had to change it. The agency had to change it. The grant got extended out to give everybody time to make changes. So read the call for proposal, but if something does not look right to you and doesn't make any sense, call that agency and get clarification. And if there's something that's not in that call for proposal, then you ask them about it. Well, why isn't this in the call?
So Brennan, I
Yes.
appreciate this. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yes.
We're at 2 o'clock now. I think
Okay.
some folks are not able probably to hang on for
Okay.
much longer, but I'd love to open it up for some questions. I see there's a hand up to ask a question, I think, through the audio. That's Dr. Dana Nettles.
Mary, can I add one quick thing? I'm sorry, I got in the car, but
Absolutely, yeah.
one thing I forgot to say when Brennan was talking, it reminded me, one of the best things, go to all these websites. Almost all of them, including the value added producer grant, show all of the previous, or a lot of the previous grant winners, the awardees. Look at their projects. I mean, you can make it super similar or feed off of their ideas, but see what was approved on all of these before you make your application. All right, signing off.
That's great. Thanks, Cyndi.
Jordana, you're allowed now to talk if you'd like.
Do that.
We also have,
There's plenty of questions in the chat too. How about
yeah.
This I think is a good one. Since grant deadlines often overlap, how do you determine which request to make for each grant? Or is it okay to ask for it all from both grants and then decline if you're funded already?
Well, that depends on the grants. There's nothing stopping you from applying for 2 grants from 2 separate programs, and there's usually no restrictions on you applying to various programs. What you need to do though is decide as an organization or as an individual if you can handle managing 2 separate grants. That's the big thing. But once again, a lot of this comes down to what tools do you need to get your goals needed, and if it means applying for, say, an FMPP and an LFPP in the same year, you can do that.
Another question is, how do so you mentioned this advice, which I agree with, to become a grant reviewer if you want to, get involved with grant writing, and how do people get into grant review?
The easiest way is, once you know the major grants that are out there, is just to contact them and ask them to become a grant reviewer. On some of the grants like LFPP, FMPP, and some of the other grants, at the same time they're asking for applicants, they're also putting out a call for grant reviewers. So when you see that notice that a RFP is going to open up, simultaneously that agency will be putting out a call for reviewers. And how do you find out if you're not familiar with these grants? To me, the easiest way to find out about a lot of these grants is to get on the mailing list of the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, NSAC. and I think their website is sustainableagriculture.org. They publish a e-newsletter, I think comes out every Friday. But one of the things they do in that newsletter, it is at the time of publication, if there is a federal grant program that is open, they will let you know about it, they will describe it, and they will have links to both the application and information about the grant. To me, that's one of the easiest ways to know about these applications. These programs, and also to become like reviewers and that type of stuff. So
Great, thanks. There's another question about the research and discovery grant on the one that the person got for basal research. Was which opportunity was that?
The producer grant from Southern SARE. And SARE stands for Sustainable Agriculture, Research and Education.
Hey, Brennan, can folks have your contact information? There's a question there.
Yes. Let me see if I have it at the end of this presentation. No, not on this one. I will put it in the chat.
Awesome, thank you. And let's see, are land trusts for larger farms only? Speaking about the land trust, I think.
What, forming large land? I don't know that much about land trusts, so that may be a question for someone else.
Oh, and here in the chat is a is that Anita with the link to become a LAMP grant reviewer? That's helpful. Thanks.
Can I answer the question for the land trust? I think it depends on your goals for land trust. If you, when folks go to a land trust, like specifically for in your state, we work a lot with Black Family Land Trust, who covers North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, some other states. It depends on what you want to do with your land. So, for example, it does cost to put easements on your land. That's what we typically do with a land trust to make sure that your farmland will stay in farming. However, there are other options. And so primarily Black, brown, people of color farmers have a different interest. So you just need to talk to a local land trust to see how your interests align with the work that they currently do, because it would be very much dependent upon what your goals are for your land. So I would say not necessarily that land trusts are specifically for larger farms, but there is a cost associated with putting your land in an easement. But there are state programs that do easement programming. And we also, American Farmland Trust, will support land trust or like easement work. So if you are more interested in that, I can connect you with people at AFT that could help guide you.
That's great. Thanks, Nicole. And maybe we'll take there's a couple folks with their hands up. Ozell White.
My question has been answered. It was how to become a reviewer.
Okay, great. Well then, how about one last question? Maybe Evelyn.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, Evelyn, what's your question?
Yeah, hi. My name is Evelyn. I'm from Puerto Rico and I own a Mima's farm. It's a pig farm in Puerto Rico. I'm one of the few that is standing by right now. Like 75% of the people in Puerto Rico, they end up shutting down their business because the food for the pigs is so expensive. Like right now, I'm spending over $2,000 monthly in the last few months, and we're not even making that much right now. And it been crazy, and nobody over here help. I don't want to lose my farm because this is the only thing that I know. You know, this is the only thing that I've been doing my whole life, ever since that I'm 8 years old. You know, I love to raise pig. I got really good quality of pigs, but we really doesn't have any benefit. at all. Like the government doesn't help, nobody help. I'm a small farmer, so I'm not enrolled in the USDA right now because they require a bunch of stuff. So if I'm gonna do all the stuff that they require me, I'm not gonna have any money to feed my animals. So I want to know if there is any help out there right now with the food increase situation for my pigs.
What part of Puerto Rico are you in?
I'm from San Sebastian, Puerto Rico,
Where's that?
in the west side.
Okay, okay. I've done a lot of work up in Utuado. Actually, I'm supposed to be down in Puerto Rico the end of the month, and we are trying. Are you part of the Pork Producers Cooperative?
Yes, you guys gonna come and visit me. Rafi gonna come to visit me,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm supposed to be coming down with UPR extension. So in terms of what actual money's out there to help producers, that's something we're gonna have to sniff out because I'm not sure. I would need to know more about what your needs are. And Puerto Rico is a whole different world than what
I
happens on
know.
the mainland, unfortunately. So
I know it's so sad because over here, like we are in the middle of nowhere, and I'm one of the few farms stand up. Like right now, all my friends that I know, they shut down already. But I
mhm,
cannot let go my pigs. I don't even take that in consideration. That's my whole life,
mhm.
Like I'm doing a good quality. I got a very, very good quality pigs. And I love what I do. I own the place. I own the land. We've been building the buildings. Rafi helped me also to extend my maternity section.
Mhm.
So I just want to continue, but I'm struggling right now. And my nightmare will be like me shutting down because one day I'm going to wake up without no money for me to feed my pigs.
Okay. All right. Maybe it's something I can work on with Rafi. Um,
Yeah, appreciate you bringing that up, Evelyn. It's definitely a very different environment in Puerto Rico for a lot of reasons. And
Yeah,
so
it
thanks
been
for
it
that
been
question.
really depressed, like this is all I do ever since that I'm 8 years old. We used to raise pigs, we did raise it basically my whole life. I'm 52 years old right now, and my worst nightmare is waking up one day and say, well, I gotta sell them because I cannot feed them. And this is my worst nightmare. And after all that I went through to have them the way that they are right now, I got a maternity section. I got different sections. So now finally, after I've been through all this, give up because of food, I don't think it's fair.
Mm, yeah. Well, thanks for that. We are well past the hour, so I just want to thank our awesome panelists, Brennan and Cyndi. I think Cyndi probably had to log off already. Thanks again to our partners at American Farmland Trust and Nicole, who's here on the call, Black Family Land Trust and North Carolina Cooperative Extension. Also helped us put this on today. I dropped in the chat a link to a form for y'all to fill out an evaluation of today's webinar. So please do that. That will help us constantly improve our programming and just kind of know what you thought. So with that, I think we'll end it. And thanks, Carolina, for running the technology. Thanks for being here, everybody. Have a good one.
bye-bye.
Bye.
I want to say before Evelyn gets off, Mina said that her organization can help if you could share your contact information. So just want to make sure that that happens.